Welcome to our latest Soccer Down Here 1v1. I'm Jason Longshore and joined by a frequent guest of the show, Tom Robinson of World Football Index. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good to be on here. It's obviously been a pretty crazy last month of sport and just kind of settling down after the contrasting emotions of the final there, but not too long to rest on my laurels because Libertadores and Argentinian football is kicking off again. So, it's football as always.
Yeah, I figured we needed to do this separately from a show because this would go a million different places. We'll try to stay on track. I make no guarantees for those of you out there listening because there's so much to dig into. You had a busy, crazy weekend, probably of very different emotions from late Saturday night, at least on this side of the Atlantic, and the rest of the day on Sunday. Just what was it like for you consuming those two finals?
Yeah, it was crazy because both nations, the nations that I associate myself with, Argentina and England, have had such long waits for trophies. And my partner, she's from Argentina, but is also got an Italian passport. So she was kind of a bit conflicted there in the other final. But yeah, it was, at the start of the weekend, I kind of thought both the sides were probably just about, not necessarily underdogs, but neither of them were favourites to win, in my eyes at least anyway. So I was fully prepping myself as a pessimistic England fan that, it was potentially going to be another defeat. But no, it was, first of all, brilliant to watch Argentina finally lift that trophy, Messi to finally get his hands on it, as I'm sure we'll get on to. And then, Sunday was an odd one because of all the crazy scenes you saw outside of the stadium and in London in general. I'm not in London myself and I couldn't get down there, but in hindsight, I think I was quite glad that I wasn't around. And chatting to some of my friends who do live in London, they were just saying, even just nowhere near the stadium, if they're on the underground there and things like that, some of the scenes they were seeing really early, it was kind of, I guess, you can't excuse it at all, but you can kind of maybe look at the pent up emotions of the pandemic and lockdown and all coming out. It was, I think a lot of people have described it almost as kind of those worst elements you see of England away, but all congregated at home for once. And it was, I think the combination of the way that the operation was handled there and the final result, which is a shame for all of us, now feels everyone feeling quite reflective and sort of down about the whole situation from what had been such a joyous tournament for most of the time. So mixed emotions for sure, but at least I got one victory to talk about. That's the main thing.
How do you compare the two tournaments? Because I've heard so many different things, and look, I consume a lot of media from England, and I feel like maybe after the disappointment of the final on Sunday, there was some kind of backhanded talk about the Copa America and how it doesn't compare. You consume both probably equally as much as anybody else in the world. How do you compare these two tournaments?
Yeah, I think certainly because the two are happening at the same time. The Copa was given real short shrift over here certainly in the English media. Other podcasts I listen to, that kind of thing. It was just almost like a side note at the end, just, and Messi won a title. I definitely think the sort of slapdash organisation of it didn't help, as we've spoken about on previous shows, and also the fact that the group stage, again, much like the Euro group stage, really lacked much jeopardy. I think the quality of football, for the most part, probably didn't compare to the Euros, and that's sort of why it can maybe be a bit dismissed by some people. But I think, a lot of people don't realise quite what a big achievement it is for Argentina because I think they see Messi, they know the name, it's one of the biggest names in football, and they think, it's Argentina, of course they're going to win one eventually. But and then also, as we can talk about the scenes outside the stadium, there's a lot of us here who cover South American football, who've lived in South America, who are kind of used to the certainly Eurocentric press, sort of always playing up the the sort of maybe the uncivilized side of things, should we put it? So the fact that, from all those who came over and criticised the scenes outside the Boca River Libertadores final, sometimes you've got to have a look at your own back garden as well. So there's a lot of comparisons, I think. But certainly it didn't seem to get the usual attention, albeit a lot of it was broadcast on the BBC, not on their main channel. But right. I think that was perhaps why some of the people who tuned in, and depending on which game they tuned in, might not have been as impressed as they would have done usually. But it's something you kind of learn to live with a little bit here, is for a kind of snobby Eurocentric view of things occasionally. But at least some of us who are more worldly about these things can see the benefits of both.
We get a weird mishmash of all of it here, and we get a lot of Spanish language coverage, obviously, which is going to be heavily tilted with the South American tournament and Mexico, but we have a large, American soccer community that has grown up on the Premier League and the common language and everything there. So it's been fascinating to pay attention to it and how people have reacted. I thought the Copa America really picked up with the drama, at least, and the intensity in the knockouts. And the knockouts were a blast. The Argentina-Colombia match is one that'll go into folklore, it feels like. Maybe mostly for Emiliano Martinez, maybe. But Messi's performance in that one as well, with the bloody ankle. And we saw another bloody ankle in the final. I mean, it felt like Argentina really gutted this out and showed a ton of character in winning the trophy. And some of the young guys around Messi, I think, stepped up and showed that this is a team that maybe we have to put on that short list of contenders next year.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is one of the big aspects of certainly Argentina's improvement, is they seem to have more leaders on the pitch now. I mean, maybe it's partly because over the last 3 years, finally some of these younger players who maybe should have been into the national team set up earlier have got a good amount of games under their belt. The likes of Rodrigo de Paul, who I thought was absolutely phenomenal, particularly in the final, but or across the whole tournament. I thought he really stepped up above his usual very consistent levels anyway. But all these guys have been playing pretty regularly, even though Scaloni has been chopping and changing a fair bit, trying to work things out. And not only have they got the leaders, but it just seemed like the mood in the camp was probably the best I've seen it in decades. And I think you've got to give Scaloni some credit for that, and just the whole team around him as well. Aymar, the other coaches there, Ajala, Samuel, even Menotti, the role he plays back home as well. So I think the fact they've got that younger coaching staff who've played in Europe, Scaloni and Aymar were in the same 2006 World Cup squad as Messi, so they've there's a bit of crossover there, and while Scaloni, I think we'll all admit, maybe is not the best manager yet because he's kind of learning on the job, he's certainly got the ambience around the squad right. And I think, again, if we're comparing things to the Euros, those teams that did really well in the Euros also had that great team spirit. Italy, England, Denmark, Spain to a certain extent. And I think there's something that maybe often goes forgotten in this kind of era of stats and analysing everything like that sometimes there are just these, human truths to it as well. And certainly that was important in Argentina's victory.
How would you compare Scaloni and Southgate? Because I feel like both teams had some similarities in that, with Argentina, my frustration a lot of times would be that they would jump out and play well early and then kind of sit back and be very conservative. And we saw that in the final with England. How would you compare those two, and what's the difference? Why was one successful and one wasn't?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, just from a personal level, you've got Scaloni and Southgate being the guys who come in as this initially caretaker role, when just filling the place when someone needed to step up and at short notice. So I think there's definitely that, and they've both seen their sides through transitions. And yeah, you're 100% right about the actual games where typically Argentina would get off to a good start and then sit back, and England did the same thing. I think the slight difference is certainly initially in Scaloni's regime, he had to do that out of necessity more so than this Southgate. I mean, I think perhaps we're looking more at England in 2018 compared to Argentina right now might be a more fitting comparison.
Yeah.
The big difference is Argentina have the best player in the world. And Messi was incredible. And, as much as I love Jack Grealish, I probably can't call him the best player in the world just yet for England. So, I think the big difference for me is Southgate had the tools to be more attacking and chose not to, whereas yes, Argentina will dominate some of the smaller teams, but even in those games against Uruguay, Colombia, Chile, it was tight. They weren't necessarily always in control of those games. Even the 3-0 win against Ecuador was, the gloss on that result of the scoreline, doesn't tell the whole story. So I think Scaloni's team is one that can improve and will improve, and certainly is now a team that you would say can do something at a major tournament. Whereas if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I thought they'd be lucky to get to the semi-finals of the Copa. Whereas now, they've achieved that trophy, they've got that monkey off the back, and now you've got to say if they continue this trajectory, keep Messi fit, then this is a team that's a young team as well, a bit like England, that should in theory be on the upward trajectory. So I think there is a lot of comparisons there.
It's kind of wild to think about what Argentina can be in this next year now that monkey is off the back of Lionel Messi and Argentina as a whole. What does this do for Messi's legacy? Does it really change anything? I mean, should it change anything, or does it just kind of solidify him as, if not the best ever, in the very, very short list of it?
Yeah, I don't think realistically it does change anything, because the level of brilliance he's shown on such a consistent basis is going to be hard to be ever repeated, and just the way he plays is going to go down in history as well. I think what it does do is silence that small minority who says, well, what's he ever won? And I think sometimes it's, we maybe just see that as, internet trolls and Ronaldo fans who might be bringing that up more than anything. But there will have been a sizable portion of your non-football supporting or not that football interested Argentinian public who will maybe point to that in comparisons with Diego.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it's going to be based on your age, who you saw play live, that maybe people who watched Diego in his prime, and the way that he dragged an okay but not brilliant team to a World Cup, and what he did for Napoli, and the kind of Argentinian personality that he showed, are always probably going to lean on that. But Messi certainly has shown, as we mentioned in that penalty shootout, that he was getting stuck in, getting the sledging, to use a cricket term over here, and also he's someone who's very much still very Argentinian at heart. He's not lost his Argentinian accent. Rosario is still very much home for him, and I think those little things will help add to his legacy, and I mean, it's just something that you can't believe he's not already achieved, but now he has. It's the right thing that has justice has finally been done effectively. But I mean, it's such a brilliant body of work that you can't really ignore everything else he's achieved as well.
I can't wait to see what it looks like between now and the lead up to 2022, and if this maybe even frees him up to play more comfortably and not have that pressure on his back, and what that could do for Argentina.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's only going to be a positive. I mean, one, just to get that winning feel, certainly for the younger players who've never experienced that. But for the likes of Messi, Otamendi, Di Maria, these guys, Agüero as well, these guys who should have probably achieved more at national team level, given how great they've been and how close they've got as well. A few small decisions go, or penalty shootouts go another way, and this is a team that wins 3 Copa Americas or wins a World Cup. So yeah, I think it ensures that generation isn't sort of tarnished by it as the almost men, the people who fail in the finals. So I think it's got to free things up, and yeah, there's a lot of young players who've only just been drafted into the squad, really. I mean, okay, Emi Martinez isn't young per se, but he's, in international terms, he is. So the fact that he wasn't even a guaranteed starter before this tournament, and now you've got to look at him going forward as Argentina's number 1 for a good few years.
Right.
Is great. Cuti Romero in defence as well. Even playing half fit in the final there, he gives something to Argentina. So there's a lot of younger players sort of reaching the peak, and more young players to come in from all the sort of good work that's belatedly been done in the youth team setup. So yeah, it feels like this transition is moving into the stage where they can really be competitive now.
Yeah, we'll be watching really closely here too with Ezequiel Barco, part of the Olympic squad, as that gets ready to start. I'm excited about some of the young talent in that group.
Yeah, there's a lot of great talent there. Obviously, Thiago Almada is another one who could really light up that tournament. Adolfo Gaich, the centre forward, is a type of centre forward you don't really see a lot of it in Argentina. And yeah, some of the young defenders as well. Neuen Perez, he's maybe dropped off the radar a little bit in the last year, but certainly a year or year and a half ago, you were thinking that he was probably above the pecking order of someone even like Romero in central defence, and he looks like a real leader coming forward. And there's some good players in there, and they take it super seriously, as do all the South American nations that are in there. So you kind of think the success that Messi and co had at Olympic level can really set you up for the national team going forward.
Yeah, excited to see how they do there. But it doesn't stop for CONMEBOL. I mean, you have the final on Saturday, and we're back into Copa Libertadores today with the round of 16. I'm excited to see Defensa y Justicia, although it's not the same Defensa that we've seen. They've had a lot of absences now, or a lot of players have moved on. They always seem to play Flamengo, very tough, a lot of friction between those two. The all-Argentine matchup with River and Argentinos. So are there any other matchups in the round of 16 that you're especially looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Defensa Flamengo one's going to be good. Has the potential to be a really interesting game, even if there's quite a lot of change. Or even Renato Gaucho coming in as manager for Rogerio Ceni for Flamengo as well. So that's going to be interesting. I think the two ties that really jump out at me, though, are Boca versus Atlético Mineiro. I think it's a really tasty fixture, and I think Mineiro are definitely one of the candidates here, and they've probably got Boca at quite a good time.
Yeah.
Brazilian league has been going on. Argentinian league, you're going from a standing start almost. No Tevez, quite a few other people have left. The players they've brought in, Rolon, Orsini, Briasco, pretty underwhelming, realistically, for a club like Boca. And yeah, I think although everyone would probably like to see the Super Classico against River in the next round, I really think Mineiro could really put down a marker in this competition if they beat them. But obviously Boca have got so much history behind them that it's not going to be easy, and they're defensively very good. So that's a fascinating tie. And I like the look of Vélez versus Barcelona as well. I think they're maybe two teams that aren't probably on everyone's radar as dark horses necessarily, but Barcelona got through a very good group of Boca, Santos, playing away at the strongest as well, and they've gone. They quietly went about their business, and also they come up against an entertaining Vélez side, probably one of the best sides on paper and in form over the last 6 months or so in Argentina. Yes, there won't be any Almada, who'll be at the Olympics there, but this is a really interesting tie, and if one of these then goes on to meet Cerro versus Fluminense, we've got on that side of the draw, one really interesting team who's not had loads of recent continental success, and it could be absolutely any of the four of them, to be honest. It's such a hard one to predict out of those ties, and you could easily see one of them popping up in the semi-final and getting on a bit of a run and surprising some of the big established teams like Flamengo, Palmeiras, and all that. So that's an interesting one that I'm definitely looking forward to.
Does it still feel like to you that the Brazilian teams have the upper hand coming into this round?
Yeah, I would say so. I think you've got some really strong sides there. Palmeiras flying in the league as well. Really good young crop of players. Flamengo have just got a ridiculous amount of talent as well. Mineiro looked really good, as I mentioned before there. And I think they're realistically the big challengers, because Boca are going through a bit of transition and haven't looked great. River really struggled in the group stage as well, albeit a few issues that weren't necessarily in their control. But they've lost Santos Borré, which is going to be a tough guy to replace, but they have at least stolen a couple of Defensa Justicia's best players in Enzo Fernandez and Brian Romero. So that's going to be interesting. I feel like River, out of the traditional Argentinians, are the only one who could probably challenge the Brazilians. But yeah, there's definitely one of those surprise packages I mentioned there who could put a cat amongst the pigeons for sure.
What about the Sudamericana? Because it's back underway as well, and there's a few matchups here. I mean, the one that immediately grabs my attention is the Uruguayan Clásico with Nacional and Peñarol. The emotion in that one will be off the charts.
Yeah, that is going to be absolutely brilliant. I think it's always good when you get a big big local Clásico in the continental tournaments, and yeah, there's going to be fireworks there, and it's a fascinating tie because Nacional over the last year and a half have been really impressive in the league, and they didn't do quite as much in the Libertadores as I had hoped, but they've got some really exciting players there. Brian Ocampo is in absolutely insane form right now. He's one of the most exciting young players. But then Peñarol have got a couple of really good youngsters themselves with El Canario Alvarez, the young striker there. He's on a great run of form, and he looks like the next great young striker out of Uruguay. And also Facundo Torres, who had such a good Copa America off the bench. So there's probably some more flair and attacking talent than we're used to from this side, which probably most people would think is more likely going to be remembered for hard challenges and red cards. But right. Yeah, that's definitely the standout one there. But with some of the teams dropping down from the Libertadores, you've got some very interesting ones. Independiente del Valle versus Bragantino.
Yeah, that feels like a sneaky good one.
Yeah, that's definitely like the smart, well-run clubs who maybe aren't the biggest names, but yeah, Bragantino have been making some good signings, and whatever you think about the Red Bull kind of involvement in sports, they're at least getting things working on the pitch. And LDU Quito versus Gremio is a fascinating one, because I thought Quito were pretty good in the Libertadores, but we're in a tough group. Yeah. Gremio have been flying in the Sudamericana, but are doing terribly in the league. I think they're bottom of the Brasileirão, despite having some pretty good players. So yeah, there's lots of storylines, and yeah, certainly when you get to the knockout stages of the Sudamericana, it gets really, really interesting, and certainly can rival the Libertadores for drama and interest.
You can watch all of these in the U.S. on Fnatis, fntz.co/soccer down here. You can get a trial. You can watch it on beIN Sports as well, but Fnatis will have all of the games on beIN Connect, and there's games over the next 3 days this week, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. It's going to be absolute chaos and a lot of fun. Couple wildcard questions for you as we wrap up on South America. The talk out of Brazil right now, where it sounds like the top teams in the first division are looking at essentially a Premier League kind of breakaway from the federation. What's your take on that, and how soon do you think something like that might actually come into effect?
I mean, I think it's long overdue, really, because the schedule in Brazil has always been a massive hindrance, I think, to their progression. it's just so many games in the league, and I think if they can step in and organise something, they've got enough big clubs there to make it work. And I mean, again, I don't know how quickly it's likely to happen, but yeah, I mean, if you've ever read any of Tim Vickery's work, the great Tim Vickery, I think that's a drum that he's been banging probably for the last 10-15 years, that they need to modernize the structure there. So yeah, I would definitely be all for that, albeit even if it made Brazil even more financially powerful than they already are. That's maybe one thing from the Argentinian side of things. Maybe I don't want them to to modernize. And I'm not sure too sure how long it would take. Sometimes these things can happen very rapidly, and other times it can be a slow old progress with a lot of vested interests, hard to break up. So yeah, that's definitely something that is interesting, and yeah, definitely something to follow for sure.
We have the new Argentine season starting this weekend. The first official league season since the end of the Superliga in March of 2020. We've had these little short tournaments since, and now it is a league with 25 games. It's going to be kind of compressed, trying to get these in with international breaks, with other things going on. Teams early on are going to be dealing with CONMEBOL play as well. Is it going to take some time in your mind to kind of see things shake out as to who's the favorites and who's the teams that are going to be struggling to keep up?
Yeah, for sure. I think another thing to factor in on top of those other elements is, the teams who have got continental competition, in both Sudamericana and Libertadores. It all depends on how far one of those teams goes. If River get to a semi-final, final, they're not going to be caring about the league.
Right.
Whereas if Boca crash out straight away, they can actually think, okay, well, let's put everything into the league here. So in theory, it should benefit those who aren't in continental competition. So obviously Colón, as the Copa champions, they're going to be ones to watch, but they've lost Pulga Rodriguez. So that makes me definitely think that Gimnasia are going to be a bit of a dark horse to watch, because they've been doing quite well over the last two little short cup tournaments, and they're not completely out of the question when it comes to relegations, which won't affect this year but will be next year, and it's based on the average point system. So realistically, if you're being smart, you've got to be stacking up some points now to ensure you're not going to be in trouble next year. So Gimnasia need to do a bit of that, and I think they've got the squad to be pushing, for continental qualification at least. And I suppose, Estudiantes, Talleres, Banfield, Lanús, maybe San Lorenzo, but I think it's always a risk to back San Lorenzo right now. So they're the sides that can take advantage early, maybe build up a bit of head of steam before some of these sides get eliminated from continental competition. But then, you've got to look at the guys who've been performing on a regular basis: Boca, River, Vélez, Racing. I think they're going to be all right up there as well. So it's a bit of a weird tournament. Everyone playing each other once. You've also got VAR coming in for the first time, so no doubt that's just going to throw another stick of dynamite into the barrel. I think it's going to be interesting. And just when you thought you were trying to reduce the amount of teams back down to a normal level, they add two more in, and maybe when I'm about 60 or on my deathbed or something, it'll be down to onto a 20 team league finally. But it keeps you on your toes. That's one thing at least.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to finish with this a little bit closer to home. Charlotte FC and MLS, they come in next year as an expansion team. They kind of surprised a lot of people in hiring Miguel Angel Ramirez from formerly of Independiente del Valle, most recently with Internacional. A different kind of hire than we've seen in MLS generally, and he's got some time to shape a squad that only has a handful of players under contract for next year. For people who don't know and didn't follow IDV as closely, what does Ramirez bring to the table in your mind?
Well, he's a very talented manager, coming in, winning the Sudamericana. Again, he's someone who favors possession based football, again, high press, energetic football, what probably you'd aesthetically say is pleasing football. And he did a great job with Independiente del Valle. I think the move to Brazil was always going to be tricky because you don't get much time there. And, he's not done too badly in my eyes, but again, that's no guarantee that you're going to get kept on. So I was interested to see what his next moves would be, because Independiente del Valle are a really well-run club. They've got a really good structure in there. They try and pick managers who are going to play a similar style. So there's a continuity. So there was always that side of me that wondered, okay, is this Ramirez bringing something in, or is this him coming into just the perfect club for his coaching style? And how much is the club, how much is him? But I think from what I've seen, when it clicks, it's really great. And you'd like to think that the guys at Charlotte are they're thinking long term here. They're thinking about a guy who can mold hopefully a talented roster there and take them on long term and really build something to give them a good standing straight off the bat. So I think it's a really bold and really exciting one. Certainly for any supporters of them, that's straight away a real big statement of intent and one to firmly keep an eye on. So yeah, it's good to see ever more sort of Latin American, although I suppose he's Spanish technically, but he's built his career in South America. Those ideas coming in, bringing a different idea to the league. So yeah, that's definitely made me sit up and take notice of Charlotte a lot more, that's for sure.
Yeah, if we get Gabriel Heinze and Ramirez next year, Atlanta and Charlotte, those games could be a blast to watch.
Yeah, big time.
Excited to see it. Tom, thanks for everything as always. What do you have coming up? What can people be on the lookout for from you?
We've got a podcast just reviewing the Copa America final there, which I'm about to record, so that could well be out by the time you see this. And yeah, some pieces coming up on World Football Index, on Y Scout. So yeah, as ever, just follow at TomRowe89 and you'll see everything that's going on there.
We'll do, and we'll blast it out as well. We'll talk to you soon once we get a couple weeks into the Argentine season, because I have no idea how this thing is going to go with Boca and River both almost kind of in rebuild modes, and now Pulga's at Gimnasia, and defense has lost everybody. I don't know. Yeah,
I think that's the wisest way to take it, is don't try and guess too much early doors, because it will inevitably come back to bite you. So it's just let it happen and see what trends emerge after a few weeks, and that's probably the time to take a look and see how everything's going.
Yeah, a few weeks in, we'll come back and we'll compare notes and we'll see where everything stands.
Excellent.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Look forward. Bye.